Would I go into the past or would I go into the future? It got acquired by a very small venture company in the UK. Before I joined Google was I created this iOS app that allowed students to track their application process for internships, summer insight programs.
What's your advice of what people can do to be able to get an opportunity, a shot at Google? Welcome to another episode of Career Tea. I'm super excited for today's episode. We're interviewing Viraj, who is a product manager at Google. He's been at Google for about 9 years, so he's gone through multiple different roles and groups. So we'll learn about the day-to-day similarities and differences of those roles. We'll also learn about where he was before Google, and we'll have a short discussion about AI, as we know it is evolving in today's world and changing the world as we speak. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Viraj, thank you so much for coming on Career Tea today.
Thanks so much for having me, Saurabh. This is great.
I'm super excited to talk to you. As you know, I know you have extensive experience at Google, one of the biggest tech companies. So I'm excited to learn about, how you got into Google as well as how your career has been evolving. So to kind of get started, I want to know what you studied in school that has kind of made you fit to be, an employee at Google for 9 years.
Yeah, I don't know whether you describe me as someone to be fit to be at Google. I definitely think I'm lucky to have worked there and have been there so long. But in terms of my background, I studied electrical and electronic engineering in the UK. I did a master's in it as well. I took a year out and did what's called an industrial placement, which is you essentially take a gap year and go work for an enterprise company. During that time, I worked for Microsoft for a year, and it was really enlightening, and I think that's what really got me into tech. For my master's, I built an autonomous flying drone, which was a lot of fun. Sort of putting together the PCB, which is like the brains of a drone, and having it crash all over the electrical engineering department. And then by the end of it all, doing this big presentation to hopefully get a good grade for my master's. But I really enjoyed tinkering with a lot of different things. I definitely think my background in electrical and electronic engineering gave me a bit of a technical edge. And I think that's how I found my way into Google, both the having experience at Microsoft and then actually doing a summer internship at the European headquarters as well.
Nice. Wow. So to slightly touch on electrical engineering and electronic engineering, you said, undergrad, what does it involve regarding the classes that you take? And I want to know does it involve taking a lot of coding and programming classes as well?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So it's the electronics of it. So soldering PCBs or microprocessors together, actually with a soldering iron and all of that kind of stuff.
So more of the physical aspect.
But then also we did have C++ programming classes and things like that. I would say I was by far not the strongest in either of those two modules over the 4 years that I was an electronic and electrical engineering student. But it definitely did give me the technical foundation to be able to, at least in my job now, converse with engineers and sort of understand what they're saying and also be able to relay that back to them. So, yeah.
So, and you got your master's in electrical engineering as well?
I did. Just decided to do another year of it, yeah.
And the drone project that you did, that was more like the capstone type project?
Yeah, that's was worth 70% of my grade. Yeah. So it's essentially the entire academic year where you try and figure out what your project is, you write an entire paper on it, and then you have a big demonstration at the end. So that was really good. I really enjoyed that. I don't think I would have been successful if it wasn't for the rest of my course mates helping me, because I was working on a pretty cool master's thesis. So yeah, learned a lot from that experience, actually putting something out there into the real world that you could see fly.
Yeah.
All the code that I wrote up is open source in MIT's open source library of things. So even though it's been about 9 years, I still get messages on my GitHub, mostly commenting on some bugs that are there that I need to fix. But I'm happy with the number of forks it's got since then, which has been really nice.
So for those that don't know, could you explain what open source means?
Sure. Yeah. Open source is basically, it started off as a movement, but it's just having no sort of copyright on the work that's done. It's open. And it's open, it's free to use. Anybody can use it at a baseline level, and they can, what's called forking it. So changing any part of it and then running it and doing your own thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in the world now in software which is trying to be pushed towards that direction of open source. A good example is what Meta is doing with their Llama models. All of that is considered open source.
And you said that you mentioned that you worked at Microsoft. That was before you graduated with your master's, right?
It was. So I completed my second year of university, and then I took a year out and I worked for Microsoft in their offices in Reading, which is also in the UK. And basically for a whole year, I learned basically how to be a big tech employee. I think it was a great sort of entryway into the workplace from like a perspective of someone who's not worked any more than like 3 months in one go, like doing all those other summer internships. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Got to learn a lot. It was during the Steve Ballmer days, so I'm sure it's much more exciting now. But yeah, I think that's what helped me foray myself into then doing a summer internship at Google and then coming here full time.
So it wasn't just an internship you did, not full time at Microsoft?
It was a year-long internship.
A year long.
Yes.
So almost like a year, like full time.
It's almost like a year full time, yeah. And then I was also a student ambassador for my final year as well. You know, they gave us like a laptop and a phone. I had that Windows phone with like the 45 megapixel camera on the back or whatever it is, which I thought was pretty cool. And yeah, it was great.
Nice.
It was a great experience.
So then would you say that having that Microsoft experience internship, as well as obviously graduating with your master's, that kind of what got your foot in the door for Google?
I think it definitely helped. I'd say by far the thing that sort of ticked the box from a recruiter's perspective is that I had experience and I hadn't graduated yet. Especially an entire year at a big tech company was definitely favorable. And I actually remember my interview with the hiring manager for Google for my summer internship, whereby I think I had two, and each of them said, "Oh wow, you haven't graduated yet, and yet you have a year experience, you know, at another big tech company." And so they thought that was really good. And I think my experiences at Microsoft were directly sort of transitional to the work that they wanted me to do during my Google internship as well.
So the way you got your internship at Google, you just applied online?
Yep.
Because there's multiple different ways, I guess. These days, I feel like people are wondering like how they can get their foot into an internship at a big tech company, or full-timers, how they can just, get an interview. And so they don't know whether to just apply on LinkedIn, reach out to recruiters. What was the way you went about it? Just applied?
Just applied and sort of hope for the best. But everything that was optional, I did, right? So I wrote the cover letter. I wrote a very in-depth CV. I shared all my grades that I had as well. So I left nothing to the imagination. I sort of really wanted the role. I thought it'd be a really good ad before I graduate. And I thought it'd be really, really good experience. And so, yeah, I just applied and I guess I got lucky.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people get lucky with Google, so that's amazing.
Definitely grateful for that.
What was your internship experience at Google? And how long was it? Was it just a summer?
It was just the summer. It was about 3.5 months long. I did it in the European headquarters, which was in Dublin. And I was actually on the global business organization side, not on the technical side. And I joined a fairly small team at the time that was doing sort of like revenue optimization. And given I'd done a lot of business related sort of work when I was at Microsoft on their technical services team, a lot of that was really useful to sort of plug and play directly as soon as I joined. So sort of big presentations to senior leadership, coming up with different strategies to improve optimization. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed my internship. I got to work with some really fantastic people who are still there now. And so, yeah, I think the internship was very close to what the movie was like, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
At least my cohort was. We were all very like fun-loving. Always had plans in the evening to do things, and it was just so global. There was folks from everywhere and like different backgrounds.
Did you guys have those like in the movie they show how they get one big assignment, almost like a challenge, and they got to work on it? Did you guys have something like that where it was like a challenge to work on?
We didn't have that, but we tried to replicate as much of the movie as possible that we could. So when we did tell the story about how was the Google internship, we could say like, yeah, it was like the movie. But we did have a part of the internship. You did have to have like 1, 2, or 3 fairly big projects which had measurable outcomes. And then depending on the success of that, you would probably be invited back to apply to a graduate role.
Nice. So I'm guessing at the end of your internship is where you landed a full-time offer?
So all full-time offers at the time, this was I think 2013, where you had to come back to Dublin. And as wonderful as Dublin is, I kind of wanted to stay in London. And so those sort of graduate roles did not exist. And so I actually just continued to apply to different places. I had some offers from major consulting houses, investment banking, private wealth management. And I was kind of excited to, like, why don't we try something new? And I think I had just signed one of the investment banking contracts for a graduate role. And I think literally the day later, I got an email from the university campus recruiting going, hey, so we're now going to offer graduate roles in London, but it's only for this specific team. Are you interested? I was like, look, why don't I come for an interview? Let's see how I do, because I've just signed another contract with another company to join them. And then we'll just go from there. I remember because I was an intern already, so I only had to do, I think it was 2 or 3 interviews on top.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of an accelerated process. I had all of those in like one day. And so I left the office to get to the Tube, the London Underground. By the time I was at the turnstile, I got a phone call from the recruiter saying like they'd love to offer me the position. So the entire trip from the office to where I was living at the time in London, I was just kind of doing a pros and cons thing in my head. And I was just like, you know what? I really enjoyed my summer internship. It's very familiar to me. I know the product. I know the work. I know what's expected. So why don't I just go back to Google and haven't left since.
Nice. Wow. So you said that you got an offer from an investment banking firm. How did that come about? Like, what was that role that we're offering you? Because seeing how, you did internships in big tech, right?
Yeah.
You didn't really have like investment banking background.
Sure.
What were they offering you? And like, what was the offer?
It was a electronic trading team. That's who I was going to work with, doing a lot of sort of like research. And the private wealth management one was like working with a lot of high net worth clients. And I think as long as you're like fairly extroverted and you like to present and things like that, I think that's kind of like the skill set that they look for. And you're sort of like quick on your feet to, help customers understand complex sort of products and things like that. But then I think on the electronic trading side, I've always just sort of been in that finance space, just doing that myself personally. And I remember the application process included actually playing a trading game. So like this investment bank came to our university and we would play we were on like the stock floor and like the price of a product would go up or down and you'd have to bid.
Kind of like a mock thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And from that, I got a really high score and that actually got me to the final stage of those interviews.
Nice.
I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. Again, probably got lucky with some of that, but I think that's where that came from. But then I think, again, I applied at that time with a year at Microsoft as well as a summer at Google. And so I think I'd kind of, or hopefully showed myself to other prospective recruiters that I'm someone who has the background, has the grit, and was willing to put the work in. So
you ever look back and like, I mean, you're at Google for 9 years now, so I'm sure like you're very happy with where you're at. But do you ever look back and like wonder like, oh, what would have happened if I went towards like the investment banking route?
I do think in hindsight sometimes But I think I made the right decision. Because I don't think I could wear a suit every day, even for weddings. Right now, it's such a pain for me to sort all of that out. There's that, but then also, I think because I've had multiple careers at Google, maybe outside of banking, I kind of got that consultancy experience. I got the product experience. I got the VC experience a little bit. So I kind of got all of that over the different 9 years that I've had, and sort of gone through different transitions and tried different things. And so don't regret it too much.
Yeah, nice. That's good to hear. And as you mentioned, you don't like wearing suits and, the different roles at Google. I'll kind of go off of that. I was going to ask this later, but what is the culture of, what to wear at Google? Since you say, you don't really wear suits, I hear it's very comfortable. So what's the culture of that?
I think smart casual is as smart as you're probably going to get there. I think it differs between if you're an engineer or technical, or whether you're in sales and marketing. I think if you visit our sales and marketing offices, everyone's dressed to the nines, look fantastic, very stylish, very eloquently spoken. I think that's less common on the engineering side, but like very comfortable t-shirt and jeans and a hoodie, the classic. A lot of Patagonia vests.
Nice.
Or I think Arc'teryx is maybe the new brand that's starting to pick up. But yeah, kind of wear what you want that's suitable in a workplace and whatever is comfortable.
Yeah. So let's start with Google. You said you accepted Google after seeing the pros and cons between that offer and the investment banking offer. What was the position that you got hired at Google? And how long were you in that position for? What was the first year like?
Yeah, I was hired as a product specialist. So again, supporting the global business organization, the sales side of the business on selling ads. But the part that I looked after with a bunch of other grads who I'm still friends with to this day, sort of looked after very high net worth clients who spend a lot of money on Google ads, and were sort of their go-to person to solve sort of issues, whether it's something wrong with the product, something wrong with the data, something wrong with the ad spend. We're essentially the troubleshooters to try and resolve those issues. So if you're, I don't know, Coca-Cola, for example, and you're looking at your Google Analytics account and you're not happy with like the conversion rates that you're getting on some of the ad spend that you've done, sort of deep diving into that and seeing, is there anything technically wrong? Is there any ways we can improve it? And then sharing that with sales, or sometimes speaking directly to senior folks at that company to help sort of resolve the issue.
Nice.
Very, very fast paced.
Yeah. And what were some of the biggest clients that you worked with in that role for that?
I would just think about
if you can speak on it.
The top 50 companies on the S&P 500 were all within that band to be considered sort of a GCAS or large customer.
Nice. A few years ago, I was just doing like a side project, and which it was me and my friend, and we were testing with our product, with our company. It was a very side project, and we had Google ads running for it too. And I remember we tried to set it up, and I don't know what we did wrong, but we got blocked or banned. We got a message from Google saying that your account's been blocked.
Were you clicking on your own ads, Saurabh?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know what we did wrong. It was so complicated, and I don't know. And they wouldn't say exact reason. And I remember I reached out to them and I was like, tell me what I did so I don't have to do it again. I was like, I genuinely don't know what I did. But I just remember how complicated it was. So I can understand, working for those big companies, how much it takes to really understand how to improve their ads, how to improve their company. So that's great. And how long were you in that role for?
About 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah.
And what was the transition there to your next role?
So I had a fantastic manager. I got promoted within those 18 months, and so I was looking to do something else. At that time, I was doing a project for a different team, and they were in strategy and operations. And at that time, I had built a knack for building dashboards. I was very good at SQL. I led a small team of analysts to sort of build these sort of dashboards and collect this data that was going to be useful for our team internally. Turns out our counterparts in sales really wanted that, and so it became a much bigger thing. And so I got to work with this other team in strategy and operations who really liked what I had done, and they actually wanted to make it bigger and better. And so the hiring manager at the time, we sat down and she's like, I have an open headcount. I'm looking to hire someone with your expertise. Would you like to join my team? And I thought, yeah, that'd be fantastic, but I don't want to just be creating, sort of dashboards all the time. I'd like to learn your skill set. And she was very senior at McKinsey before she joined Google. Yeah. So I was like, can you teach me the McKinsey consultancy sort of skill set? Because that's one of the offers that I turned down. And I was like, I'd love to be able to do executive presentations and things like that, telling the story, being able to come up with narratives very quickly. And she's like, this seems like a very fair trade. You do this and I'll teach you the ways of like the big consultancy houses. And so I left my team and I joined her team. At the time in Europe, it was just her and myself. And I learned so much. I think even to today, I'm probably using so much of what I learned from my manager at the time into my role today.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. And when you said that, she was at Google and she reached out to you to join her team, brings me to my next question of, how Google hires a lot of the time. Would you say that, I know Google does hire internally a lot. Would you say that they hire more internal than external? And do you think that's why it might be kind of very competitive for people to get into Google, like while being professional careers?
Yeah, I definitely that could be part of it. I wouldn't say it's like harder to transition inside, but I don't think it's as easy as some people might think. You still have to go through an interview process. You still have to go to a hiring committee most times. So it's sort of like the same process you would if you were external. But I do think once you have your foot in the door, you do open yourself up to far more opportunities than you would have if you were not in Google at the time.
Kind of like they already kind of trust you. I mean, you're already working there. You're part of the community organization.
They've invested in you, right? Like at that time, I'd been there 18 months. If they had to hire someone external, it's a 6-month ramp up time, right? Versus someone who just understands the business and the product and the feature set and can just hit the ground running. Yeah,
absolutely. So what was your day-to-day like of this new role, and how did it compare, I guess, to your first role at Google? And before we go, remind me, how many roles have you had at Google during the 9 years?
I've had a few, I guess. I have had a few eras, which I think is the new buzzword this year. So I started off as an intern on the Bold Immersive Internship Program, and then, which is like business focused, business and operations. I then joined as a product specialist, which was still on the business side. But a little bit technical because you had to be able to troubleshoot really big issues for clients. And then I moved into strategy and operations.
That was your second one,
that was my second one.
Manager brought
exactly. And so together with her, we led that initiative and then grew the team for all of EMEA, which was really exciting. I then moved to drive that centrally. So moved to New York. To be on that central strategy team. From there, I moved to what's called corporate engineering, which is where I'm in now, which is the internal workings of Google, where I moved to product operations. So again, very strategy and operations focused, but more so to like something in the middle of being a consultant and a chief of staff. Did that. Then I did a couple of 20% projects, which are well known at Google, sort of like these, when you have 80% of your time can be towards your core job and 20% towards something else. I got to work with the Google Developer Organization, so helping their VC arm on a bunch of different opportunities and things like that, which is really interesting. And then I moved into product management, which is where I am now and where I've been for the last 2.5 years.
Got it. Okay. So kind of looking at when you were working with her, and you said you guys were working, it was part of EMEA, right? And that's like Europe, right?
Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Middle East, and Africa. So tell me a little bit about how your like day-to-day was in that job and how it led you to then move to Central and come to America, come to New York.
My day-to-day in strategy and operations for that team was doing a lot of like quarterly business reviews, working with senior leadership on strategy, all that kind of work to help kind of like steer the ship of what we should be doing. Where should we invest in next year? Where should we hire in? What sort of strategies have been applied to the broader sort of like boots on the ground folks? Which of those is successful? Which of those is not? So again, very, very heavy sort of like consultancy type work and providing recommendations on how to execute and all of those things. And then as that started to grow in each of the regions in EMEA, I went to an offsite, which was on the West Coast, and I was speaking to my VP at the time, and he was talking about like how everything's going great in EMEA and how everything's growing and doing really well, and if I had any interest in moving to the States. And I was like, yeah, I absolutely do. It's like, yeah, we'd love to have you in Mountain View. I thought that was great. I slept on it, and the next day I said, I'd love to come to the States, but how about New York? And he goes, let's just make it happen.
Yeah.
And so there was team members already in New York at the time, so it made it an easy transition for me. And yeah, been here ever since.
Nice.
And so yeah, really like New York and working here. But the difference between the work was it was on a bigger stage. I wasn't part of a regional team. I was on a global team. And so had to work with the other regional teams, had to work with what the global strategy was, what hiring looked like too. At the time, also doing like pushing certain types of role archetypes to low-cost areas and things like that, sort of optimizing all of that stuff, doing reorganizations, all of those things that people hate, which is part of big tech. I was very heavily involved in at the time. But it really gave me the sort of perspective of how things inside sort of any big tech company sort of works, and kind of like the thankless stuff that needs to be done in order to progress the company forward. So yeah, it was a great experience.
What did you think about Google London versus, or not London, Dublin it was, right?
Well, Dublin's where I did the internship. London's where I did after I graduated.
So what's the difference between Google London, Google New York City?
Oh, wow. I'll say this. So I think being in big tech and working for an American company is definitely where it's at for me. I think there's just a lot more opportunities here. There's a lot more products here too. I think at least at the time when I was in London, the opportunities there were far more narrower. Obviously now with DeepMind being based in London, there's a lot more like engineering opportunities. There's like Android there, there's YouTube, Play as well. But I think, what was it? Yeah, 6 years ago, I think it was definitely smaller. But yeah, I think they each have their positives. Yeah. But I think if you're looking to grow a career in tech, you got to spend some time near the headquarters or where that company is based in. And I think that's what's been really good for me over the last couple of years.
Nice. While we're comparing Google, I want to ask, what do you think? How would you compare Google? I know you only spent 1 year at Microsoft, but another big tech giant. How would you compare working at Google versus Microsoft? And I mean, more on a day-to-day basis, culture, environment-wise.
I think Microsoft was a bit more corporate.
Okay.
I think Google, at least at the time when I joined, was quite fun. I think it still is fun, but obviously it's becoming older and it's becoming mature, right? So I think with that comes with you have to shed some of the funness that might have been there before with a very like startup-ish type of company. But I'm sure Microsoft's changed a bunch since Satya Nadella's taken over. Yeah, I mean, you can look at the stock price to see that kind of change. But yeah, at least while I was there, it was very corporate versus I think even Google now is probably still not as corporate as what it was when I was an intern at Microsoft.
Yeah, become more chill, maybe.
A lot more chill, I'd say, yeah.
So when you moved to the New York office, you were still part of the strategy and operations team,
I was,
correct? Yeah. And how long were you in that role for before transitioning again? And what opted that transition to go to your next role? Yeah,
so my manager, who had taught me all of that sort of managing consulting skill set, allowed me to move to the States to be under a different manager, leading the work sort of centrally. there were some people who I worked with 2 years ago at Google at the time who are now in Corp Eng, and they sort of reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm building a team. It's a brand new team. This is going to be a 1,500 person organization. We'd love you to join product operations for it, and to sort of go from there. And so what that would do, it would have taken me from the business side of Google to the technical side of Google. And I think I've always deep down wanted to be more technical. And so when that opportunity came, I did what's called a ladder transfer, where again, you do all these interviews just to show that you're able to do the work. Had a couple of interviews as well, and had to put together what's called an artifact sort of document, which lists how all the work that I've done in White would relate to this future role. So again, you could argue that it's just as much as what work you would have had to do if you were an external hire. So I did that, was successful in that, and then moved over.
Nice. And you said that was product operations.
That's product operations, from strategy and operations. Yeah.
Is that the group you're in now?
So I'm still within corporate engineering, but I'm a product manager now.
Right. Okay.
Which required another the same switch.
So what was your day-to-day like, I guess, in that new role?
In product operations?
Yeah, product operations.
Very similar, but on the technical side. So rather than talking about like performance of advertisements or customer sort of woes or issues or requests that they want, this was far more on the product side. So less on the things that we sell, but more on the internal technical workings of Google. And so learning all of that infrastructure was very fun, very exciting. And I think that's what's helped me become a product manager afterwards.
Nice. So someone like yourself who's transitioned across strategic and product roles, what would you say are some important skills for someone to have to be able to adapt to changing environments within tech?
Yeah, I'd say drink from the fire hose. Just learn as fast as possible. Ask lots of questions, get that all out the way. Sort of reiterate what you've just learned to someone who's a specialist in that area. And for those first 6 months, just sort of grind until you've really understood the subject matter. So you're now the expert. I always like to, when people ask me, I've switched so much times, why do I keep switching? I think my goal is I'm trying to be as large as possible, right? I don't want to be too narrow in sort of my knowledge base. I'm trying to catch them all, right? If we think about a Pokemon reference. And so I think because I've just kept doing that, I've really enjoyed learning new things, working with different sort of people with different backgrounds, whether they're an engineer at, like the distinguished engineer level, or whether they're a vendor working on troubleshooting. I think there's just so much to learn from everybody, and then you slowly start to be the expert, and then you can help teach somebody else too. Yeah,
that's well said. And kind of, going off of that, how you said you want to make yourself as large as possible, and, kind of taking as many skills as you can. It's kind of awesome that Google allows people to be able to, move laterally, like you said, to be able to experience different roles. Because it's always best to kind of empower your own employees to gain more skills within the company. Because I know I've heard from people how it's really hard for them to be able to, switch groups within their company. But it seems like kind of Google at least allows that opportunity to be able to shoot for that. So seeing how you're a product manager now, what's your day-to-day like now as a product manager, and how does it differ from when you came into product operations?
Yeah, I'll quantify being a PM right now because I'm on the infrastructure side.
Okay.
It's different from a PM who's maybe on the consumer side. But on the infrastructure side, my day-to-day is, whether it's like product planning, developing the roadmap, writing charters, writing the strategy or the vision for the year, working hands-on with engineers to ship a particular feature, or coming up with ideas and brainstorming on how things can be improved, or even, learning that something's not working how you intended and how we should make it better. All of that, I think, is part of the product management hat that I have been wearing. In terms of product operations, I would say there's probably a 60% overlap between the two. You still have to be able to tell a story, put together some fantastic slides to help tell that narrative. But and being able to do all this analysis, right? Like if you have a bunch of data or a bunch of research, you have to take that and then use that to tell the story as to why we are doing X, Y, Z, or why we're not launching this feature. And so having that skill set from product operations and speaking to senior stakeholders and then having to do that again as a PM, but also working with engineers has been pretty rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think it's been easier because there was that 60% overlap between the two ladder profiles.
I see. What so just looking at, let's say now that you're a product manager and in your group, because I know it's different within all different companies, what levels and roles are, beneath it. So what's, I guess, like the first level, like within your group and all the levels in between till becoming like a product manager at Google?
Right. So I think the only level below PM is APM, Associate Product Manager. If you join Google as an APM, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think for the first 18 months, you get to travel to different hotspots around the world where they're doing something pretty nifty with different types of technology. I think it's a really, really good program, and it's what Google's sort of known for, at least when they started the product management ladder, is hiring on the APM. So you have APMs, then you have PMs, and you have senior PMs, group PMs, and then product directors, product VPs, product SVPs. That's what it looks like. But yeah, they're all at different levels of seniority.
Next, I want to ask a question regarding projects and products. Maybe you have an answer to it, maybe not. Has there been any project or product that you worked on that at that time, because technology is evolving very fast, at that time you thought, wow, this is really pushing the boundaries of technology in the world?
Yeah. So I can't talk about what I'm working on, but I can share my favorite public thing that Google has put out recently, and that's the Illuminate project and Notebook LLM.
Okay.
How that works is you basically just share the link of a PDF or upload that PDF yourself, and it turns it into a podcast, kind of like what we're doing now. And it sounds like something NPR would produce. It's unreal. It's done so well. You could like listen to it as a podcast, and if you just gave it to somebody and didn't tell them this was created with AI, I don't think you'd be able to tell the difference. It's that well done. And then with Notebook LLM, you can again upload your whatever context you want to provide, and you can ask it questions. So let's say there was a paper about AI and you wanted to ask it questions about it. You literally upload that, it becomes its context, and then you can go ahead and ask it questions. All right, so give me a summary of the findings, or who are the people who wrote this paper and where are they now? How does an LLM work? Because that'd be described in the paper, and you can do all of those things. One interesting way I've been using it is I uploaded my CV and I'd ask it questions. Like, hey, does this person have this experience or that experience? How would you improve this? And things like that. What impact metrics are missing? How would you quantify it? Is it too long? Is it too short? And I think the feedback, although generic, is getting better, and I found it incredibly useful.
That's out there right now?
It's out there right now.
And what's it called again?
So Notebook LLM.
Notebook LLM. And this is such a great thing that I got to check it out.
I think a lot of folks, especially students, are using it for their notes.
Yeah.
So they would upload sort of like the work that their professor has given them, and then ask it questions and use that to sort of at least start the work that they're trying to do if it's trying to like write a paper or whatever. So rather than starting off with a blank sheet, you start off with a bit more knowledge in that space, and I think that's been really useful. So
Notebook LLM, and this leads me to another question that I was going to ask later on, but we'll just connect the bridges there now. This kind of sounds similar to, what I guess ChatGPT could be doing too, right? It seems like Notebook LLM is doing more features, like you said, like turning text into, let's say, podcast or a voice audio. But regarding the aspect of giving it things and being like, hey, what can I improve in my resume or how is it different, I guess, with ChatGPT? And also, like, the question that I was going to originally ask with ChatGPT was ChatGPT versus Bard, right? Which
or Gemini
Google's.
now.
Or it's Gemini now. Okay.
Yes.
So I did not know that. So I want to touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So I mean, if we start off with, there's these different houses, right? Let's call them that. So we have Google, which has its own LLM and AI offering. There's OpenAI that has its own AI and LLM offering. There are other companies like Anthropic, and then there's Perplexity as well. So with Google, we have Gemini. With OpenAI, you have ChatGPT and then the different versions. And then with Anthropic, you have Claude. Now, they're all different houses with their own types of LLMs. Some have higher benchmark scores than the other, but they're all essentially the same, right? They're all what you call GPTs, and that's where ChatGPT comes from, which is a generative pre-trained transformer. And all that means is it generates work based on data that you give it, which then goes through something that's pre-trained and then goes through a transformer, which basically arranges it in a way that gives you the output that you're looking for. So all of these companies have their own GPTs and they're all LLMs. And I know we're in kind of that mania right now, but eventually there'll be a time where they're all pretty much the same. They're all car engines, and you can put them in different vehicles and they'll probably give you the output that you want. I think certain ones are focusing on certain types of use cases over others. From my research, Claude, so Anthropic's one, does very well in terms of like coding, like software copilot. I think Google's works really well appended to search and gives you that sort of context, and sort of open AI and ChatGPT is kind of like in the middle. You can kind of like do it all and play around with it.
Yeah. So regarding, I guess, how all these different machines versus Google's or different companies or ChatGPT, regarding on how they come up with their answers, you say it essentially takes in all the information that you feed into it. So how does it come up with, I guess, answers so fast? Is it all the information that people, like, it gathers what people give it? Or I know now, I don't remember how it was in the beginning when ChatGPT was launched, but now it can almost search the internet. You can give it a URL and it could like kind of like read it, search it. But I remember at a time, first few months, it became very inaccurate for like a few weeks.
Oh, yes.
Was that because it was gathering information from people and maybe getting bad information? How does it generate all its answers?
I can't speak as to why it gave those results, but sort of like generally, it's all these models are based on pre-trained data, and so if you have good data, you're probably going to get a good output. But you can have data that is very skewed one way or data that's very skewed with another, so you have to have all the data. Obviously, the advantage is for the company that owns the most data. You can scour the internet, you can scour videos on YouTube, and so on and so forth. Is advantageous. But there is so much open source data out there too, and there's so much synthetic data that you can make, which Meta does a lot of, which you can use to pre-train those models to give you those different outputs. And eventually there'll be a time where, we've literally scoured all data sets, all the data lakes, absolutely in everything, and there'll be really, really good models. And I don't think users will be able to tell the difference between whether they used a Gemini one, a ChatGPT one, a Claude one. I think at that time it will just be like, what kind of car do you drive? And kind of does the same kind of thing. But what I do think is there will be a nuance is outside the generalness. Like when we look into the world of agents, like specific tasks and how well those are executed, I think that's where the differentiation will lie, sort of like 3 to 5 years in the future.
You think that's where essentially like the room for growth is?
I think so. And I think the analogy here is if you guys have watched Her, the Joaquin Phoenix movie.
Okay, I have not yet.
Fantastic movie, would highly recommend watching it. I think that's the state that we could get to in the next 3 to 5 years, where everybody has their own personal assistant that you can speak to and that can control different parts of your house. Order food that you want, get you a taxi, book a holiday, all of those things, from prompting very little because it already has all this data about you, and just sort of like execute. Like imagine the personal assistant, which is basically in your brain. As long as you give it enough context and enough of your data, I think the world's their oyster, the agent's oyster. So
you can only imagine.
Yeah.
So seeing how, we're talking about all the great things that AI can do. A lot of people fear AI because taking a lot of jobs away. Where do you see AI could impact the workforce, and how it could impact the workforce in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I do think it's net positive, in my opinion. I would say that AI would get rid of a lot of the grunt work, a lot of boring, maybe not super skilled labor, or very repetitive tasks. Think about customer service and requesting a refund and having to speak to somebody around that, because it's a bit of a nuanced edge case. Having that sort of work sort of seamlessly, where you think you're speaking to somebody and it's not, it's like an agent of some kind, and they're able to go ahead and understand the context that you're providing and, complete the work. I think Klarna, the buy now pay later company, have been using that a lot for their customer service work, and I think it's cut down a significant number of hours worth of customer service for them. And so if that's already happening now,
Yeah.
I think that kind of work is slowly starting to go away. Do we think it's going to replace all software engineers? I don't think that's the case for the next 3 to 5 years.
What about 10 years? Maybe, because what if companies become more greedy and more greedy, competing, they want more profit, thinking like 10 to 15 years, there could be not necessarily just software engineers, but certain industries that might nearly be just wiped out.
Even with 10 years, I still think that's less likely, because you still need them to test all the information that's out there. You'll still need someone to check, is everything correct? You still need somebody to edit and do all of those things. Now, I think that edit part and testing part, maybe AI is starting to do, but at the end of the day, I think you still need a human to push launch on a feature. Otherwise, if there's no sort of oversight on it, I think things might not end well. If you push out a product or feature that doesn't work in the way that it's intended, etc. I don't think as a product owner that's what you would want.
Yeah.
But yeah, 10 years, that's really far looking out. I think anything could happen with AI. But 3 to 5 years, I think customer service, sort of the being an assistant, someone who like answers the phone, does scheduling, work like that. Some very like maybe simple coding work, if you're like building a prototype and things like that. I think that's probably going to be disruptive now. But like, I don't think sort of blue collar jobs are going to go anywhere anytime soon. I still think that being a plumber or electrician is going to be a great business, a roofer or whatever. Yeah. I think those kind of jobs aren't going to high labor sort of roles. But I think like if you work in like one of the big 4 consultancy houses, I think we're at a point where you can provide it data and it can make a slide deck for you. So yeah.
Speaking of, blue collared work, like you mentioned, like electrician or plumber or roofers, I think those are going to become way more valuable as a couple years, as it goes on, because you can't really have AI or automation do those things. But I guess there are some blue collar works that are being automated or people are foreseeing them. I'm sure you've been hearing about the longshoremen at the ports going on strike. I've heard that one of the things that they're including in their contract is that there shouldn't be any automation within, I don't know how many years they said.
Yep.
And as I'm learning more about all the strikes going on, I heard about this port. It's somewhere in Asia. I forgot what country, but essentially that port is fully automated, at least outside at the port. So all the workers are now inside the building, and they just move, the cranes, the machines, just on computer. There's no one out there. So I guess that's like an area where, like you said, you still need people inside to kind of control it. So somewhat could be automated, but you still need the humans inside to, run those machines and control those.
The oversight, I think, you need to use that human touch.
Yeah. So my next question is regarding learning programming languages, coding, programming languages. I want to ask you how important you think it is with the AI evolving so fast. And, AI, essentially you can just tell it to, give me this answer, give me that answer. And now you can do it with computer languages as well. And the reason I'm asking what your thoughts are is earlier in the year, NVIDIA CEO in a conference mentioned how it's essentially useless for anyone to now go and learn computer, languages, because in a few years it will be indistinguishable with like plain English. And that's what they're trying to get to, is essentially just be someone to be able to type in English and write a code, program something.
Yep.
So what's your thoughts on that? What do you think the use of learning programming languages is nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I want to go against what the CEO of NVIDIA is saying, but I'd largely agree, but mostly because I've played around in this space quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there will be a point where you don't need to learn all of these things to an expert level. The example that I'll provide is if you want to build a prototype app today using AI tools, you could probably get a locally running application in like an hour, and even share that online with your friend. If you go ahead and productionize that with a couple of simple steps. There are tools like v0.dev where you can literally ask it to build you a front end. You can work with Cursor, which is another AI tool to help sort of write up all of that code and do the back end. And then you can use Claude to debug all the issues. So like when you're compiling everything, you get like a bunch of errors, you copy and paste the error and says, well, this is how you fix it. And then you just go ahead and tell Claude, hey, can you fix that in my IDE? And I'll just go ahead and like fix it. And then, like within an hour, you can have a very simple swipe left, swipe right application, or like some sort of computer vision application very quickly. And that's without learning a line of code.
Do you think companies should focus or start to focus less on, people having those skills? For example, like when I'm, always like looking, on LinkedIn, when you see these big tech companies, whether they are a tech position or not, almost always like a lot of them require you to know some sort of language.
Yep.
Do you think they should start to focus less on knowing those, because how easy and accessible it is to, create something with what's out there regarding AI, and kind of focus more on like problem solving skills?
I still think we need people who know how to code and who are good in those sort of very specific coding languages, because as I said before, you still need to like check that work.
Yeah.
And the example I gave earlier was about like prototyping. But if you're going to build like an enterprise application, you need to make sure that application is super secure, works really well, has a really good user flow, all of that. And I don't think AI is at that point where it can do all of that just yet. I think we're pretty close, but I still think we're a few years out. And you have to do a lot of testing. And my team at Google, we do have test engineers, we do have front-end engineers, we do have back-end engineers, and that's what I've learned over the last sort of 2 years or so. It's not just build me this thing and it will just sort of work. There's a whole iceberg under what you see on the client side, and all of that needs to be maintained. There's a lot of tech debt that might be there as well, and a lot of maintenance that's required. And so, if you just need to build a quick prototype, I think AI is fantastic for that. The second you have to turn that prototype into something enterprise worthy and scale that out, you're probably going to have to hire maybe not 6 engineers, but at least 2 or 3 to make sure that when you go from prototype to enterprise, that it's at the quality in which you need it to be. Last thing you want to do is ship a product where you can just get SQL injected on the login screen and then your thing is toast because everyone's talking about it on Twitter/X and going, got hacked immediately, so I don't want to use your product. So
circling back to your personal experiences, have you worked on any side tech projects? Being product manager, dealing with projects at work. Have you had any side projects that you've worked on yourself?
Yeah, I've mostly done the side projects for educational reasons, just to learning. Again, like Tinker, I love to play around with different things. One thing I did before I joined Google was I created this iOS app that allowed students to track their application process for internships, summer insight programs, graduate roles, even PhD roles. by basically scraping all of the careers web pages using a web crawler, collecting all that information, understanding all the different types of steps that there are involved in the application process. So, as a user, you could just go ahead and say, like, I applied to all these places, and you just kind of like swipe to say that you've got through the next stage, etc. And then if somebody else that's in your university had gone through that process, it'd connect you to and stuff like that. And so that was like the first ever big thing that I built whilst at university. I had some help from some friends from high school to help get that up the App Store and make sure that runs, etc.
Oh, nice. So it's on the App Store?
Not anymore.
Okay.
It got acquired by a very small venture company in the UK.
That's crazy.
It's not like I made a big bag of money or anything, but it was nice to have that validation that I sort of built something that had product market fit. I don't think they did anything with it, to be honest, but it was just sort of really nice to have gone through that process. And then since then, I've done a fair bit of tinkering. Again, with some of my friends here, we, for learning purposes, went ahead and built this AI application where you could take a picture of your meal, and then it would tell you all the ingredients that you probably use, the calories. It'd connect to your sort of your health apps that you have, and sort of recommend like what you should do next time, whether you're eating too many carbs or whatever your goals are. Give a health score based on all the food and things like that. And so that was really like just fun to learn and play with like different AI models, understand how that works, understand how all these data pipelines work with different LLMs onto the client-facing side of things, like computer vision into text, into insights, into connecting with your iPhone or Android phone and your Fitbit or your Apple Watch has been really rewarding. And that's currently on the App Store. And it's learning a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
That's cool. What is it called?
It's called Snack, SNACC.
I've seen something like that before. I wonder if it was Snack. Like I've seen... That's crazy. Is there other companies like doing similar things?
I'm sure. I think, again, because AI has enabled all this sort of easy plug-play stuff that was historically quite difficult, it does make it much easier now. And I think I'm sure there are a lot of apps in this space that do that. I don't think there's a big moat.
Yeah.
I think what will separate the winners from the not winners would be just doing a lot of advertising, making sure that people use it, doing a lot of customer feedback and things like that. And so I think there's ones that have done really well, and because they had really good go-to-market, it's been adopted. There's ones that are quieter, but maybe serve more of a niche, like maybe if you have diabetes and it focuses on that. So like the glycemic index of different types of food. But I think, again, my takeaway from tinkering has been just learning how all of this stuff plugs together. And in the case of Snack, the folks that are actually working on it full time, I'm excited for what they're going to do with it, and I think it's going to be really exciting. But from my perspective, just having gone through the education side and learning how all that works on the back end, and how it's all sort of plug and play was really fascinating to me.
Wow, that is so cool, so exciting, and the name Snack. I mean,
SNACC,
perfect name for it.
Very Gen Z.
All right, so we'll do a shout out here for anybody out there that's in personal training, fitness, that wants to kind of look at their meals, calculate what they're eating. Like he said, easy to go. I'm gonna have to check it out for sure. So Snack, check that out. Is it both on? You say it's on Apple Store?
So it's on the Apple Store, and then for Android, it's a web app. So snack.fit, fit.
Okay.
You'll be able to use that in your browser.
Cool.
And then the last thing I'll share that I've been working on, again with friends, I guess there's a trend here, I think, is since coming out of the pandemic, I felt like there was very little time that we all spent like as a community sort of like doing things. And so I wanted to do something that sort of brought us all together. And so I started hosting like regular dinners with people, and like you had to invite somebody else as well. So you get like a bigger and bigger community. Did board games as well. And then also did poker. And the thing that's still running to this day is the poker.
Nice.
And so we've built a community of poker players here in New York. We're at 180 people.
Wow.
Play like 2 to 3 times a week. Completely legal.
You guys host it in person?
We host in person. There's no like rake or anything. It's just
Right.
like amongst friends. And we have an application, which is a web app, which one of my partners built. Jamie, who's a tinkerer as well, who just loves to play around and build all these things. And so together with him, we've gone ahead and created this low code, no code application where you can sort of like RSVP for upcoming games. You can see your stats. There's like this whole reservation process, and then you can go ahead and like settle up afterwards really easily. So all the pain points that are involved with different aspects of the sort of bringing people together, playing, counting up the chips afterwards, and then sending everyone's winnings their way, all done in one place really seamlessly. And we've been getting really, really good feedback on that app. And so that's called Tiny Leagues, because we're creating little small leagues.
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Tiny Leagues.
Tiny Leagues. And so we've had our first league be set up that's separate from the one that I set up 2.5 years ago. And that's doing really well. They already have like 50 players who play like almost every weekend. They're probably playing now, to be honest. And it's provided me with so much joy to get immediate sort of product market fit for the need of this, but also hearing all the feedback and people actively go like, oh, you know what, this feature would be really useful because the onboarding process right now is too complex, or it'd be really good if we could have a quick way of counting up chips at the end, etc. So now I have a very clear mandate with my partner Jamie on what that is and what that looks like, and really excited to turn this into an actual native app and continue to do this under the rules of poker. So like we don't take any rake, we don't take any cut. Again, it's just a game amongst friends. But really fun, really nice, and it's probably the thing I'm most excited about because it just brings people together, and that makes me really happy.
Wow, you guys are creating some very cool, very useful apps out there in like different areas, different markets.
Thanks. We'll have to have you guys come and play some poker.
I would love to. I'd love to come play some poker. Wow. So kind of pivoting off of that back into Google. What do you think is something that sets Google apart, culture structure wise, from its competitors or other big top tech companies?
So Google is massive, right? There's YouTube, which is its own thing. There's Cloud, which is its own thing. There's Google Play. There's the entire hardware side, like the phones. There's the health side with all like Fitbit. There's like, and that includes like Nest and everything else. Then there's the ads business as well. So there's like, it's just so huge, and there's just so many different verticals within it. And I guess you could argue that's maybe the same at Microsoft. That's almost the same at Facebook as well. So for like those three, I'd say they're all the same. I think in terms of opportunity, you can go and jump between those different verticals there. But yeah, I don't think there's too much that's different. I think Facebook also does free food and free gym and stuff like that in terms of from a perks perspective. And so, yeah, I'd actually say there's not that much that's different, but I will say Google has changed over the years from my personal experience. I think, as I've said earlier, it's becoming much more of a mature company. It's like growing up. And so there's much more corporate elements to it. And I'm sure that will slowly happen at places like Facebook, and probably already has happened at Microsoft. So I think if you want to know what's going to happen to Google from a culture perspective, you can look at Microsoft. And if you want to know what's going to happen to Meta, you can sort of look at Google.
Yeah. Seeing how you mentioned Google, provides the free food. Do you ever have the need to go grocery shopping?
I am famously an incredibly bad cook because I've been just fortunate to be at Google so long and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then in New York City, like you just walk anywhere and you have fantastic food. And so if you were to open my fridge, it's empty. So I think it's a blessing and a curse. It's good because I don't have to spend too much time on all of this, all of the cooking and buying everything. But also I feel like I've lost out on a skill set. So maybe something I need to add to my OKRs next year to improve on.
Yeah. If you weren't in tech and Google, what other completely different career path do you think you would have gone towards?
I think I would have probably started my own company in the drone space. I think not a regret, but looking back, it would have been really cool if I used my master's thesis into it, for a real world cause. I know that currently my software is being used to help measure radioactivity levels in nuclear facilities that are about to be demolished or have been demolished. So you can just send it through with a Geiger counter, and it sort of reports back what that is, like going through all these like tunnels and things where the rods would be, etc. So I think if I was to have been able to take that technology and apply to different things, would have been cool. There's all sorts of VTOL startups now, like the takeoff and landing planes that may replace cars in the future. If you just simply take my code and my infrastructure and stick it on that stuff, you probably have a flying taxi there. And so
simply, right?
Simply, yeah. So maybe something in that space would have been exciting, but I don't have any regrets. I still think there's time. Google has a wing division. It's called. It came out of Google X. It's a drone delivery, which I think is pretty cool. So
maybe there's some room for pivoting in the future.
Maybe there is one more pivot to go. Yeah.
So when you see these drones that people fly around, right? When you look at those, you think to yourself like you could create that from scratch.
Yeah, So I'm a drone pilot myself. I fly a drone on holiday. I do videography and photography in that space. I've gone dogfighting with it too, with like other drones, and that's been really fun. Although it can be expensive for some other folks. If you were to crash into their drone, well, expensive for the both of you, right? So, but yeah, I mean, you can buy these kits for like $300 to make your own drone.
Is that what you did?
I actually bought one from DJI, but you can sort of. I have an old one, so you can sort of manipulate the code base to do a little bit more. You can hack it,
like go farther or go higher, things like that.
Farther, you're sort of limited by the hardware itself, but like if you wanted to do some type of tracking, like track this color specifically. If you see something pop up, or actually like type out commands, so you don't even have to control, just say go here, here's all the waypoints, and then come back and land. You can do that. And actually I think what's happened now in all the new ones, you can just do that with like a touch of a finger. You can like draw a shape, you can draw a square, you can smile at it and it'll take a photo, you can wave and it'll start a countdown timer. So yeah, the rate of growth I think in that space has been great, but I'd love to. Yeah, if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably still be in that drone space, building drones, flying drones, or maybe a autonomous VTOL company would be nice. Drone delivery is still up there. Yeah, I think there's Zipline that's doing stuff with like delivering medication in Africa, specifically in Rwanda, which I think is going really, really, really well. Imagine if we had something like that here in New York. Yeah. New York is a grid-based system. If you fly where cars are, hopefully that's less risk. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to be like looking above me the whole time. I'm already worried walking in New York City, like something falling off the building.
Yeah, like an air conditioning unit or something like that. That's always a fear of mine too.
Yeah. So what would you say is the best decision you've made in your career, and how did it change things and to where you're at?
I think
like a pivotal moment.
Moving from London to New York.
Okay.
I think that's by far the biggest pivotal moment. I think, like I said earlier, working for a tech company that's based in the US, I think has been really fruitful in terms of being able to, move around so much, work with so many different types of people. I think that's been really great. But then also having an opportunity to see what else is out there as well. I think the US values tech much higher than maybe the US does. You can see that with the amount of VC investment dollars going into UK-based startups versus US. You can see that with the number of UK-based startups that IPO and the number in the US that do. So if you follow the money, you can also follow where, all these companies are investing in, and you kind of want to be in the place where folks are investing, because that can help your growth too.
Makes sense. So my next question, kind of in a similar line, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say keep taking risks. If someone has an opportunity and you've worked with them before and it's turned out well, work for them again. I think continue to work with people you've got a good track record with and you work really well with. Because I think, at least early in your career, like the first 10, 12 years, having people who want to see you succeed and help you succeed is really important. So just continue to do that and continue to get larger. Just upskill yourself. I kind of wish I jumped into the more technical part of Google much sooner because I'm really, really enjoying it. And I also think that the skill sets are transferable to other companies if that day ever comes. And then having that background, I think, is preferable, especially as a PM who is somewhat technical. I think that's an edge over a PM that is not.
Yeah. And again, I'm glad you brought back again of the concept of, making yourself larger, getting more skills. If people want to kind of adapt to the changing world right now, especially with AI, affecting technology so much, where do you think they can gain skills in that's kind of relevant to also AI?
Yeah.
Kind of becoming more skilled in that area.
The best way to learn is you have to tinker. You have to play with all of these tools. I know I mentioned v0dev, or even one I didn't mention, Marbleism. Like, go and play around with all these tools that people are putting out and see what you can create. Mm-hmm. I think the more that you play around and tinker with and just have the experience with, the more you'll realize what you can do, what you can't do. And then in the bucket of things where, you might be lacking the skill, then that's a skill that you go ahead and develop. So in the AI space, play with all these different models that come out. Watch YouTube videos about someone playing around with them and them giving you insights on it. Just be a sponge, absorb as much as possible, but also play around with it yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe as simple as like Notebook LLM and seeing like, what kind of output can I get? What is the use case that I can drive from this? Yeah. I think that in itself is incredibly fruitful. I think this day and age, there's so many people who just doom scroll or will watch something or will bookmark something like, oh, that was interesting, I'll play around with it later or whatever, and actually don't get to doing that. So as soon as you see something that's interesting, find time in that week, block it out and just play around and tinker with whatever technology that you see and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And doom scrolling is a downfall of progression.
I mean, we all do it. We all do it.
Yeah, I'm a victim of it. Down to my last two questions for you. The next one is more of a hypothetical question. Seeing how you're so involved in technology and working with new products, seeing new products come out. If you had a choice to go back in time to the past, anytime, with the knowledge of technology that you have today, versus you could go to a future, any year in the future, which one would you choose and why?
Would I go into the past or would I go into the future?
Right, at any year in the future, any year in the past. In the future, you see all the new technologies that are available, you experience that, or you could go in the past and be a god essentially with the knowledge of technology that you have now.
No, I'm definitely pro technology. I think going to the future is what I'd probably want, the direction I'd like to go. I'd love to be able to see flying cars, good medication and healthcare, sort of different tools for saving lives. I think could be really interesting. Maybe that science includes like space travel, which I think is also incredibly cool. Bit of a space nerd myself. So yeah, I definitely go 100 years into the future instead of 100 years into the past, because I just love to see what mankind would be able to do and maybe experience some of that for myself.
Yeah, perfect. Our last question to wrap up our conversation here. There's a lot of people out there that are, Google is their dream company, dream job, whether they're students and they want to get an internship, or whether full-time workers that want to kind of break into Google. And I think it might be a little bit harder for people that are in professional careers already wanting to break into Google because maybe their past experiences don't align with Google, versus being a student. I feel like you have an internship opportunity, a little easier. But what is your advice from being a Google employee, seeing the inside, seeing the outside? What's your advice of what people can do to align themselves best to be able to get an opportunity, a shot at Google?
Yeah, I would say get experience as soon as possible. Like, it doesn't have to be like specifically in the role that you're applying for, but just show that you're able to set a goal and go ahead and execute it. And I know a lot of people say, oh, but to get experience, you need experience. Even I would count projects as experience for that. And I talked about playing around with different sorts of technologies. If you play around with something and you actually build something and people use it, I would count that as experience. And I think there's a lot of people I can just see like scrolling through Twitter that are like in high school and are just like building things that have got like thousands and thousands of users. Like, even if that doesn't go anywhere, the fact that you've gone through and actually built something and tried it out, I think is more than what 99% of the people who are applying for that job would do. So find a way of getting experience, find a way of working on projects that you're passionate about and you can show what the impact of that is. And then if you're applying to a big tech company sort of broadly, I think it definitely helps to find out if you know someone who is in the company and get a referral. I think referrals definitely help. I think it's like 3 to 4 times more likely that someone will screen your application. So I would definitely do that. And then, yeah, also don't, I remember hearing this all the time, like, oh, like I didn't apply to Google because, you know, I didn't think I would get in. Well, yeah, if you don't apply, you're not going to get in.
Yeah.
So just apply.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it the first time, try again. There are so many other companies which I think are great places to learn. And it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
Apply to all the companies you find that are interesting and that you're passionate about working for, or start your own thing, which I think is what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah. Those are all great advices. One, being a numbers thing, and two, people have to believe that they can get into something or do something. There's a great quote that I always keep in the back of my head is, the one who thinks he can and the one who thinks he can't, they're both usually right, because it all starts with your mindset first.
Yeah, I like that.
And as you mentioned, starting your own thing. As you're the best example of it. Again, for people, check out Snack and Tiny Leagues. I'll definitely be checking out Snack and probably going to use it for myself. It's going to make it a lot easier to keep track of my meals. But those are great advice you gave, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are going to listen to your story, listen to your advice, and hopefully a lot of them use it to break into top companies or kind of shape their career path, whether they're a student or professionals in their career. So thank you so much for joining Career Tea today, and hopefully we'll have you back on again. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe we'll see you in the drone space at Google. You never know. And we'll talk about how AI is doing then.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Saurabh. And I think, if anyone does find this interesting, then that's great. Otherwise, you just heard me waffle on for an hour or so about things that I like. So that's great.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.